While David is setting up the laptop, let me give you a minute to introduce them. David is the Principal Specialist AI at Diconium. He has more than 15 years of experience in various fields, may it be research, machine learning, analytics. Arash, on the other hand, has been a data scientist at Dojo Madness, Chief Artificial Intelligence Scientist at Lindera, and now he's a Senior Specialist AI Engineer at Diconium. I think David will start, Arash will follow. Let's hear it.
Cool. Thank you for the introduction. This is a challenging slot as well after the lunch break, right? We have no equations, no codes, lots of pictures. So yeah, enjoy the lunch you just had and enjoy our talk. So Arash and I will take you on a high-level tour through the current debate around AI risk and the various measures that are planned or being implemented to mitigate that risk. So a bit of a skeptic pretext, AI is currently hyped as disruptive, course of humanity changing technology. Personally, as somebody working in AI every day, whether it will actually affect billions of lives is yet to be seen. We live in a clickbait economy, that's for sure. There's a very low threshold for labeling something as disruptive, and there's also a strong survivorship bias when it comes to remembering stuff that was announced as disruptive, but then kind of didn't turn out that way. So just some examples here. On the red side here, we have a disruptive technology that just ended up as a historical oddity. These are some examples from the 1950s atomic craze, where people were certain everything would be atomic. That's an actual Ford concept study of an atomic car, an atomic train, and my absolute favorites, because I have 2 kids, the atomic energy lab for you to play around with at home. Kind of didn't work out like this. Then there are technologies that are deeply transformative, but they stay in a certain niche or industry and do not affect the course of history. My favorite example is here 3D printers. I still drank my coffee from a cup I bought. We still buy stuff that is manufactured. We don't print our bread. We don't print everything we have at home. Nonetheless, this technology is absolute game changers in certain industrial niches. And then we have the rare occasions of things that really change the course of human history, that are really disruptive and transformative. My example here is the steam engine over there. So how will AI turn up? I think, if we're honest to ourselves, it's way too early to tell. But when a technology is potentially harmful, is potentially risky, it does make sense to take it seriously. To see, like, okay, if it turns out to be the new steam engine, how shall we deal with the risk? How shall we manage the risk there? And this is kind of the stance we will adopt throughout our talk here. So, to discuss risk and risk management of disruptive technology, we stay with history for a while. As we will see, the example of the steam engine has some quite interesting blueprints, some interesting analogies to the AI debate. So these are a bunch of steam engines. They were certainly impressive, but were they risky? Yes, they were indeed. They had a tendency to blow up, and if something like this happened, it looked like this, right? A combination of high pressures, bad welding, badly understood materials, unskilled operators. Actually, material science took a big leap after the steam engine was introduced, because we needed better materials for this thing to work. And obviously, when something like this happened, it wouldn't only destroy a factory, it would kill and hurt quite a few people in the process. And here's a rather grim example of 1907 data-drivenness, the Statistical Bureau of the German Kaiserreich, counting meticulously people killed immediately, heavily wounded, lightly wounded in steam engine explosions, right? And if you could go through the numbers, you have probably 2 a month. But there's also a much larger scale society impact, much bigger than a single engine blowing up, right? The steam engine changed the way that people work, or make a living, or do not make a living anymore. On the left, we have folks tearing away at a highly mechanized looms. They're not repairing it, they're not building it, they're destroying it. On the right, we see a bunch of Swiss people burning a factory. And when the Swiss start burning stuff, you know that something is disruptive. I'm Swiss myself, I can tell you this. There's a wonderful, very, very German word for these things. It's called Maschinensturm, storming the machines. And in the UK, there was a movement named the Luddites, to which you sometimes sometimes still see references today. So it makes sense to distinguish between different scales of impact when we look at risks and risk management of disruptive technologies. There's large-scale societal impact, and there is more smaller-scale technical failure. Turning to AI now, we will look at both, and we will kind of keep up this distinction. So usually when discussing new technologies, right, regardless whether it's 5G or vaccines or 3D printers, anything, we have a divide in the world. The Americans are usually absolutely certain within 5 to 10 years the world will look like this. It's going to be paradise, tech will save us all, and it's going to be awesome. This is a mural from Walt Disney's Epcot Center, Disney World. Whereas the Europeans, and especially the Germans, are absolutely certain 5G, whatever, everything will turn up like this, and it's going to kill us all. And now, what I find really fascinating about the AI debate is that this rule doesn't apply anymore. And here are two examples. There's an influential American, I would call it a think tank, the Future of Life Institute. And the Future of Life Institute wrote an open letter calling for a moratorium in AI research. And this letter wasn't signed only by many people, right? It's not so hard to get a letter signed by many people. It was signed by people from tech, and even more strikingly, it was signed by people from AI, by top-notch scientists in AI. So we have, for example, Joshua Bengio, one of the deep learning pioneers. We have at the bottom Mr. Hopfield. He has a neural network named after himself. We have some crazy people. We have Elon up there, but he's certainly a visionary. He also signed this. Now, signing a letter is easy. Some people go even further. We have Jeff Hinton, the godfather of AI, as he's called. He's basically been the guy who has stayed with neural networks when they stopped being fashionable, and he stayed all the way until he sort of figured out to develop essentially deep learning. He's quit his well-paying job at Google, and he's now touring the US to warn of the dangers of AI. And that is really quite a different picture when it comes to sort of seeing the risk of new technologies than we had before. So how might AI actually be harmful? I will take you through a very short summary of the 5 key points that are currently being discussed for the large-scale societal impact of AI. So first one, you have a massive loss of jobs due to automation, is what many people fear. And this point is really remarkably simple to our 19th century example, right? But this time, maybe for the first time, it's the white-collar jobs that are threatened by automation. Very interestingly, the Hollywood writers and actors strike that has just been ended on the writer side, I think the actors are still on strike, is partially at least about AI. It's also about sharing the revenue of streaming, but it's also about the role of AI will take in screenwriting. It's about will actors, especially sort of background actors, be replaced by AI-driven digital replica, right? So this is a labor fight with an AI topic. They haven't burned a data center yet, but this is definitely an interesting parallel. Another risk that is being discussed is automated industrial scale disinformation. Now, disinformation in order to influence elections or destabilize democracy is far from new, but the question is whether AI will make it very, very easy to do this at a massive scale and at a very quote-unquote high quality with very little resources. Then we have the point of misguided, unsupervised, and unchallenged AI decision impacting your very core civil and economic liberties. So this is AI deciding your fate in admission to education, jobs, financing, especially, as the moderator mentioned, biased or badly understood AI. We have the scenario of the fully automated surveillance state. That's a lot about biometry. And we also have the topic of autonomous weapons systems, AI, and military command and control systems. That sounds a bit like the robot apocalypse, and it's sometimes a little bit laughed about, but actually the Future of Life Institute, for example, takes this quite serious. So how is the world currently trying to deal with these, at least potential, high-scale risk? And the answer to this is large-scale regulation. I will primarily focus on the upcoming EU AI Act here. There are similar activities in the US, very much driven by the Biden White House. It's called AI Bill of Rights, if you want to Google it. There's even regulation activity going on in China. It's going to be interesting how that turns out. And if you remember GDPR and then the subsequent CCPA in California, that shows you that European regulation is something that is internationally being watched and influential. So how does the EU AI Act approach this risk? It approaches it based on the concept of a risk pyramid. At the top, we have what is considered to be unacceptable risk, and these AI practices will be strictly prohibited in the European Union. One step down, we have high-risk applications. These will be regulated. Further down in the yellow, we have limited risk applications for which there will be some transparency requirements. And at the bottom, we have the low and the minimal risk without obligations. In the following, I have some quotes. The quotes are from the paper here, which is a very nice official EU overview paper. So in the interest of time, I only want to look at the top 2 layers of the risk pyramid in the following. So let's look at unacceptable risk, right? This is things that will strictly be prohibited in the EU. So that's AI systems that deploy harmful and manipulative techniques, AI systems that exploit specific vulnerable groups, that is everything that's around social scoring, and that is real-time remote biometric identification, and then there's a little loophole, except in a limited number of cases, large-scale sort of security terrorist kind of scenarios. I've mapped this to our 5 summary points of the debate on the right. So as you can see, the unacceptable risk categories deals mainly with disinformation and with the surveillance state, to some degree also with the civil and economic liberties. Now we go one step further down in the pyramid, high risk. This is not prohibited, but we expect regulation here. The EU Act lists 8 explicit categories: biometric identification, critical infrastructure being managed or operated by AI, education, vocational training, everything around employment, worker management, access to essential private and public services, law enforcement, migration, asylum, border control, as well as justice and democratic processes. And as you can see, the high-risk category is mainly concerned with AI affecting your basic civil and economic liberties. To give some examples, this access to essential private services sounds a bit cryptic. It is widely interpreted to include access to loans and credit. So everything around credit scoring will be there. The education point doesn't aim at your vocabulary training app. For the folks at Bubble here, this aims at AI judging student essays who want admission to a master's program, things like that. And this is something that people are actively discussing. The employment part really aims at AI assessing job applicants every way down to AI firing people. Now, you might wonder what's going on with autonomous cars, what's going on with, I don't know, robot surgeries. Isn't that a bit risky too? Yes, it is. And indeed, systems that are used as safety components of a product or falling under EU health and safety harmonization legislation are also in the red in the high-risk category. Now, this slowly brings us down from the big-scale societal risk to the smaller scale, yet impactful technical failures, so the AI equivalent of the locomotive blowing up. This is something that Arash will talk about in a second. Just to stay with the Act for a few more minutes, let's briefly look at how the regulation is actually expected to look like. And the AI Act leaves a lot in the dark here. It's very vague and open. It mentions risk management, testing, robustness, training, data governance, transparency, human oversight, and cybersecurity, but without any details. That doesn't mean, however, that we're clueless on how the regulation might look like, and Arash will go into much more detail here. Finally, where is the AI Act? There was a very important parliament vote in June, and now it's in the so-called trilogue state, where the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the Council of the European Union, that's basically the body of member state governments, are discussing it. So now we leave the area of large-scale societal risk, going more to the exploding steam engines, and I'm happy to hand over to Arash.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, David, for introducing from the large scale, and thank you for listening to our talk. And I present to you now the small scale, lower level, but we will see how that will lead back again to this large scale. So before I will show you, I call it the tale of a smart horse, which lived in 1904. And the teacher, Wilhelm von Osten, was with this horse traveling to cities and marketplaces and wanted to show how clever this horse is. And it was a horse that obviously was able to do math. People were quite shocked and stunned. So, for example, asked what is 5 plus 5, the horse would just clap 10 times on this wooden block. And people thought, how does the horse do that? And that was so interesting that the Kaiser even just asked some institution to find out how that horse is doing this. But they could not come with a solution. And finally, so eventually, the psychologist and biologist Oskar Fungst was able to discern this riddle. And he found out that the horse did not do math, actually, but just measured the reaction of the people. And if the people were, humans are kind of in the mood, oh, let the horse be right. And if the body language is like that, the horse was obviously often right. So this is so funny, the story, but actually it has a very serious also implication in the area of machine learning, funnily, and AI these days. And people call this the so-called clever Hans phenomena, which you can observe a lot in the area of AI. Here I brought for you this nice paper which brought out some years ago by colleagues from Fraunhofer Institute here in Berlin. The paper was also called Unmasking Clever Hans Phenomena in Machine Learning. And here's a very, I would say, nice example here from the paper, and funnily also involving horses. And they showcased here a model which was trained on images, and images with horses or without horses, and tried to predict if there is a horse in this image. And they developed for that a tool in that group which is able to track the decisions of the system back to the input image and make heat maps on the image, which parts of the image actually decided that there is horse. And here we come to a thing that is also has kind of a resemblance of what Alex Acker showed us before lunch with the data quality. Here, obviously, one example, when you take care of data quality, you should take care that you get rid of these artist tags in this image. And obviously, the system did not do anything wrong in, as we would say, the system, the network, learned to find the minimal information that is describing this data. And the minimal information, when you have a data set where you have a lot of artist tag, a person who is obviously known to make photographs of horses, you find a lot of horse images tagged with this artist. And then the system found, okay, that's the minimal information. And if you take out this tag, the system is not able to detect the horse. And this is, as I said, clever Hans phenomena. And there are several methods or tools, I would call, to detect different kind of what we call shortcut learning. As I said to you, this is minimal information that the system finds, so this is a shortcut. Obviously, there are good shortcuts in the system. These are the features that describe the data well, but there are malicious shortcuts which we need to find out before we put such high-risk systems into the production. Here you see, here was a nice paper also recently came out, and I will not go too much detail of the examples, but you see also here on the right, the third image showing pneumonia, X-ray, and that system, for example, is deciding on the hospital tag. And that's, of course, dangerous when you come to medical products. And there are, of course, several other examples. For example, the backgrounds decide often, for example, if you have data where you see cows often in Greenland, and then the system has not learned to detect cows at the beach or somewhere else. And others like patterns on the animals may lead the system astray, and also combinations of that. So as Alex told us regarding the data, you have thousands of tools and use cases. In this area, in AI evaluation, as we call it, you have also multi-thousands of tools. You can develop new tools for new use cases, and imagine in some years maybe there will come a new, completely novel AI method for which we need to develop a completely novel tool. So that's why I will not talk about too much tools. I will show you just two samples to evaluate AI in the development process. One of this is this tool called SHAP, which, like the one that I showed you on the horse example, is just tracking the decisions of the system back to the image and puts heat maps on it. And so you, on the first phases of the development, you find out what the problem is. And you can use this tool. And another tool here is the Weight Watcher tool, which is actually interesting or funny for me because for me as a theoretical physicist, that was interesting because the theory, everything in the background is coming from statistical mechanics. So that was quite interesting. And this tool just analyzes the neural network without any data. So it just tries to find out how well the model is trained. And you see here a LinkedIn post by Charles Martin, one of the developers of that tool, who shows how, for example, these two Llama 2 models, these large language models, were actually trained. On the left side of this graph, the reddish one, you see the region where the model would be overtrained. And on the right side, it's the undertraining regime. So that tool is also quite nice to, within the process of development, you early on find out when, for example, your training process getting in the regime where you're overtraining and so on. And you can find out also if it's undertrained. But just as I said, just as sample tools, the question for us, and before we back again to this large-scale area, we have, as I said, these manifold tools and methods. We need to come up with good frameworks in order to integrate these different tools for different use cases inside frameworks. And we call this often PMT, or processes, methods, tools. You know, processes are how things are done, how and when, traceable methods, and the tools that I showed you. And all these frameworks for this specific use case must be traceable, reproducible, and verifiable in order to be really trustful and also auditable. And we did that the last, I would say, 2 years for 2 use cases. But the question is, how about standardization? You come up with these frameworks. The next step would be to standardize. And in this regime also, they have now the ISO standards building, for example, foundational standards for AI. This is ongoing. And if you have standards, the next step would be how to audit this. You need trusted institutions. Here, just a funny example, CE's certification, which here on the left side, the right one, and then on the right side, the fake Chinese one, And you need trustful institutions to really take care and about these things. And in AI, but also safety-relevant use cases, you have TÜV, for example, as one, which has got 150 years now. And before, as David showed, that was this Dampf or steam engines. That was called Dampfüberprüfungsverein. So, and that got eventually to TÜV. And we have different TÜVs. I don't want to go too much into detail in the specifics. But these institutions audit. And here the pioneers in the last years were TÜV Austria, who developed an audit catalog specifically for safety-relevant AI. And we had in the last 2 years, as I said, gone for 2 specific use cases through the certification and got, I would say, successfully the certification for these use cases. And I would reserve it for the networking to talk with you about these use cases. So I suggest you come to us, ask me and David about the certification. And with that, I say thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Arash. Thanks a lot, David. I think that was a great start to get us up after lunch break again.
Robots.
Yes,
Robots.
That was awesome. So questions. I think we still take 5 minutes for questions. Hands in the air, please. Who has questions about trusted AI, explainability, and transparency? Yes, perfect. All right, there you have your mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for very interesting talk. I really like screenshot you showed from LinkedIn post on weighted waiters, and one can notice that there is only 31 like and 1 reshare, which kind of for me reflects how much interest to this field. What do you think we as a community need to do to make sure people are more aware about this and actually to make them more active listening to this and also participating in this?
Shall I?
I can take this.
Yeah.
So I think regulation will do its work there, right? When you are in an industry that's being regulated, when you deploy AI somewhere that is, let's say, either safety or also business critical, these things will automatically become more important, right? As long as AI says, hey, that's a puppy, that's a kitten, it's okay if it fails. But the more AI goes into high risk or high business risk applications, the more these things will fail, and then people will start watching that space. I think what we can do as a community now is be proactive and, not start to read the papers when we have the first $1 billion loss of some misguided AI system or the first deaths, but really come to the topic already now.
What's needed to make it a more attractive topic? Because obviously it's really hard to get a resonance for it, I guess. It's so much more interesting to talk about tools and capabilities than talking about TÜV certification.
Yes, but I think I did obviously the last year and a half a lot in this tooling. I think for people who are technical and in the AI area, working with this on a meta level on tools to evaluate AI is also very, very interesting. So for data scientists and AI researchers, so it's very creative. So you come, you assess your AI from top level and come up with tools to evaluate. And it's, I would say, a bit more even interesting than actually AI, to my view, because you come up with creative solutions.
And you can get a Nature paper. The horse guys, they had a Nature paper, which is something that computer scientists don't pull off too often.
Well, that's a card to pull. Perfect. That's something nice to boast with. So, any more questions in the audience? Yes, there's 2 questions now. Let's hurry up.
Hi guys, thanks. So you mentioned TÜV regulations or TÜV certifications already. You've taken or accompanied 2. Where are those, or what are those regulations that actually require certification already?
You mean the catalogs or the certification?
No, I think you mean the areas, right?
The areas.
Exactly,
Medical?
exactly, yep.
Ah, yes.
Medical already requires it,
Yeah.
right? And some companies want to be proactive, right? They want the thing to be there before the regulation strikes. I think it's maybe also a bit of a learning of GDPR when it's like, ah, yeah, GDPR, and oh my God, it's there already. And yeah, I think some companies have a proactive stance, but yeah, very much the medical space.
There was one more question on the left, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I have a little bit of philosophical maybe question, and maybe yeah, I would like to know your opinion. Do you think that, so in the beginning you said that the AI, it provides a lot of potentials and can be potentially dangerous and everybody's afraid of it, but do you think personally that set of regulations will just stop us for further progress?
To further progress on the dangerous path or to further progress at all?
Well, we don't know where it leads.
Yeah,
where it
yeah.
leads to wonderful progress, but we stop it right here.
Yeah. I think regulations is the best shot we have, especially if it's not sort of very local and small, but if it's sort of big scale, right? And we see that a big market like the EU can actually force big companies to care more about, let's say, data privacy, although these companies absolutely don't want it, but it's just too valuable, the EU customers, right? So they comply begrudgingly, and I think large-scale regulation is probably the best shot we have, and I don't believe in self-regulation of these things, right? Look at Cambridge Analytica and stuff, so I do think we need the pressure, and yeah, I think it's the best we can do.
I mean, just to add, it's also important to suggest to people, us, so the technical people, to involve in this, to drive and influence the way it's regulated, and especially regarding the methods and tools, and in order to drive this the progress, I would say, to not let alone the politics and judicial regulate.
Wonderful. Thanks to the both of you for this presentation. Thanks a lot, Arash, and thanks a lot, David.